What's up, everybody? So, I've always wanted to make videos because I've always had so many questions that I wished had gotten answered when I was a college student. And one of those questions was, how are college classes structured? When I first entered college and I had to schedule classes, I just had no idea what some of this stuff meant. And I always wanted to understand it. And now that I've finished, I understand it. And I can only say I would have benefited so much from a video like this. So I really hope you enjoy this video because it's going to go over how college classes are structured overall. But to understand how college classes are structured, we need to first understand how high school schedules work. So here's a typical high school schedule. And you'll have, 7 periods in a day maybe, and you'll start at 9 and you'll end at 3:10. Different schools do it a bit differently. The point is, every day you'll start at one time, which in this case is 9 o'clock, and end at another time, which is 3:10. And that's repeated over and over for 4 years in high school. And I know some of you might have block periods, which is like on one day you have 1, 3, 5, or on another day of 2, 4, 6. The point is, you have some sort of repetition. And this is the high school schedule that everyone is used to seeing, but I want to now show you college, and I want to show you why college is different. And college is different for a lot of things. The first thing is location. All of these classes are very close to one another in high school, right? And that's in college not necessarily true because classes can be dispersed through a very large campus. Second of all of these classes tend to have students about 20 to 30 students per class, maybe more. In college, you might have much larger classes, as you're going to see. And last but not least, in high school, these classes are also going to be very structured. You'll always be taking around 6 to 7 classes every year. In college, that's not always the case. In college, you can take anywhere between 2 classes a year to even 15 to 16, right? So now I'm going to kind of show you what I mean by this. I want to show you how I scheduled classes in college. And to do that, I'm going to now pretend to be a college freshman taking English, right? So you'll see in the lower left-hand corner or mid left-hand corner, I'm going to take English, psychology, calculus, and chemistry. Those are the 4 classes I'm going to sign up for. And when I sign up for those 4 classes, you'll get the schedule that you already had seen before. And these classes have, chemistry in blue, math in green, English in red, and psych in yellow. And those are my 4 classes. And right away, you'll notice the first main difference is that the start and end times for Monday, right? In Monday, I start my classes at 9 a.m. and end them at 3 p.m. On Tuesday, I start class at 8 and end at 9:30, and I have nothing for the rest of the day, right? So in college, the number one difference is that you can schedule classes to be whatever time you want them to be. And if this is how things work out for you, you'll have class for, a couple hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but minimal class on Thursday. I've had my friends do it so that they have no class on Fridays, so that way they always get a 3-day weekend. You can do that in college. It's possible. So that's what I want you to know. In high school, you always had the 8 to 3 structure. In college, that structure is gone. Every time you come up with this schedule of classes, and every time you repick classes every quarter or every semester, you have a new schedule you're dealing with. And that schedule will help you, adjust to a new time frame. So that's the first difference. In high school we had the 8 to 3. In college, you have whatever your classes give you. The second thing is, you'll notice that Chem 1A, right, my chemistry class has this thing called LEC, which is lecture. But it also has this thing underneath called a Chem 1A DIS, which stands for a discussion. And that's because when you go to chemistry, you'll have lecture, which is what I just said, but the lecture will have 350 students in it. And that's a lot of people. Remember in high school, you had at most 30 students, maybe 40. But here you have 356 people in one lecture. And what is lecture? In lecture, in lecture, it's kind of like class in high school. You learn the big concepts. So in a chemistry 1A lecture, you'll learn something like the ideal gas law or acid-base chemistry or kinetics and chemistry about meta and transition metals, right? You'll learn all of that in lecture. Lecture is where you're exposed to the material. But discussion is 30 students. Every discussion is 30 students. So lecture might have 356 students, but discussions are 30 students. And in those small groups of 30 students, you can go over what you learned in lecture. You'll do worksheets to reinforce the concepts. You'll actually have a discussion, and you will now be able to get your questions answered. I don't know about any of you, but asking a question in a group of 356 students is intimidating. But asking a question in a group of 30 students is much more comfortable. And that's one of the biggest differences. So discussion sections will supplement the lectures, and the lectures are primarily where you're going to get the material. The lectures are also taught by a professor. So here, Professor Marsden is someone who has a PhD in chemistry and has learned and lived chemistry his whole life. On the other hand, discussion sections, like in this case Jacobs or Lucia or DePesso, all of these individuals would be graduate students. And there's graduate students who are getting their PhD. They don't have it yet, but they're getting it, and therefore they're definitely proficient in chemistry, and they can help you answer your questions. And because there are so many grad students, we can now learn a lot more and then have a lot more discussion sections to distribute to such a large population in lecture. So with that being said, you'll notice that some classes do have discussions, like Chem 1A, right? The general chemistry class has a discussion to supplement what you learn in chemistry. Similarly, the math, right? My calculus class has a discussion right here, right? You have a discussion on Tuesday, Thursday to supplement what you're learning in math. And even in math, you'll see that there are 300 people in lecture, and then your discussions really, you have a smaller tight-knit group that we're used to from high school where we'll review the concepts. You will never learn new material in discussion. You'll review the concepts you learn in lecture. So with that being said, you may have also picked up on the fact that some classes don't have discussion. Like English here only has lecture, right? And so that means why don't have a discussion? The reason why you don't have a discussion in English or in some classes is because in English, one class is only 18 to 19 people. So your class is already the size of a discussion, so they're not going to waste your time giving you an extra discussion. All right. Similarly, you'll also have another time, like psych here, psychology does not have a discussion with it. Why is that? Well, that's because psychology is only 3 units. So units are kind of like a weightage for a class. Units give you an idea of how intense the class is. The fewer units it is, the fewer hours of lecture slash discussion there are. So because psych is 3 units, there's only 3 hours of lecture per week. On the other hand, if you were to go to math, right? If you were to go to math, math is 4 units because you have 3 hours of lecture and a ton of discussions, right? So the unit count is reflective of how much time a certain class is anticipated to take. You know, the math units are much higher than the psych units. And it's not to say math is a harder class. It just means math requires a lot more work because look, you have to go to so much more class for math than you do for psych. And because of that, psych's unit count is lower, okay? And that's just all the unit count means. Psych is 3 units because it does not necessarily have as much class. And that's another reason why psych also does not have a discussion. So psych has no discussion because it's fewer units. English has no discussion because you're already getting that hardcore one-on-one interaction in English because you have such a small class size. All right? And so with that, we can now go on to something else that's different about this schedule. And you might have noticed it already, but underneath each class is a name. And this name isn't the name of a hall. And I told you already, in high school, when we were in high school back in the good old days, these classes are literally right next to each other. You can usually walk from period 4 to 5 in like 30 seconds. In college, this hall can be as far away from this as you might ever imagine. It could be 10-minute walk, it could be 15-minute walk, it could be 20-minute walk. So that's a big difference. You'll have to be walking. And I advise you all, before your first day of classes, to make sure you understand where everything is. Because if you don't, you'll get lost and you won't even be able to make it to class. Because if you're lost, you won't know where it is. And so the fact that these classes are in different locations is something you have to take into consideration. And that, I'm sure, is going to bring up this new question for all of you. If you have chemistry in one hall, like you have chemistry in one Pimentel, and then you want to go to this other hall, which is 20 minutes away, how would you do that? Like, is it a good idea to structure this back to back to back classes? Because how should I get from this class that ends at 10 to another class that starts at 10 if I don't have any time in the middle? And some of you may have already thought about that. And the way that schools do this, so first of all, the way schools do this is by either ending class early or starting class late. At Berkeley, what happens is every class, like Chem 1A here, that starts at 9, will actually start 10 minutes after the hour. So this class that starts at 9 actually starts at 9:10. That way, Anyone who's coming from an 8 to 9 p.m. 8 to 9 a.m. class has 10 minutes to get to this class. Similarly, this class, when it ends at 10 and I want to go to my discussion, the discussion will start at 10 minutes after 10. So it will start at 10:10. And so I will have 10 minutes to get from this hall to this hall because I'll end at 10 and then this class will start at 10:10. So that should make it much easier for you to schedule back to back to back classes because you do have time to walk from one class to another class. One thing I will note is that other schools do it a bit differently. Some schools will do it with the fact that you, instead of starting 10 minutes late, you end 10 minutes early. So in this case, another school like UCLA, what UCLA does is they will end at 9:50. So if the class starts at 9, they'll end at 9:50 and you'll have 10 minutes to get to this class which starts at 10, and that class will end at 10:50 and you'll have 10 minutes to get from that class to this class which starts at 11. So the point is everything works and every school will make adjustments to allow you to get from one class to another class. They're very accommodating. And so with that, I hope I addressed a lot of the main differences. I hope, we went over a lot of things. First thing, the schedule is not the same for every day in college, and you can actually manipulate it so that you have no class on Friday. Or let's say you have a ton of research you want to do on Wednesday. You can manipulate it so that you don't have much class on Wednesday. College is flexible like that. Second thing we learned, some classes have discussion sections. Those discussion sections are intended to supplement the lecture sections. All right? And the classes that don't have discussion sections, like English and Psych, are usually the classes where you either already have a very small class size or the unit count, like in Psych, is a bit low. The third thing we learned, all classes are in different locations. You will want to make sure you know the locations beforehand so you can get from one place to another place adequately, and also know that you'll have 10 minutes to walk there, usually, because the class will start 10 minutes later, or in the case of UCLA, end 10 minutes earlier. And lastly, if you ever have any more questions for me, let me know. I love to make videos on these things, and I really, really appreciate helping anyone out. And so with that, make sure you subscribe, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.